recognize. It's a story about a woman who has a need. And we could probably stop right there and talk a lot about that idea, because which one of us does not have some need? I mean, which one of us does not have some issue that we are wrestling with right now? Now, I know sometimes, especially among the children of God, the idea is that we are supposed to serve. And sometimes we get caught up on helping other folks with their problems, that when we're asked the question, well, what is the thing that you struggle with right now? What is the thing that you are trying to overcome? Sometimes we don't really have an answer, but in reality, there are things. For some of us, it's going to be sort of financial concerns. For other people, it's going to be, I'm coming up on retirement. What do I do, then? For other people, it's going to be something very, very different. Sometimes it's physical, and sometimes it's spiritual, and sometimes it is kind of a combination of all of those things as this perfect storm of unget-overable events, it would seem, that tries us and tests us. Anybody in here not have any problems that they struggle with on a regular basis? Anybody not have that thing that they think about on a regular basis that they have to constantly keep themselves in control with? Well, most of us have that thing, and if that's not you, then I really don't know what to say. But most people struggle with those things. And here we have a woman who had a problem. And she goes to the right place to try to get an answer for her problem. But she doesn't get an answer that you would expect. As a matter of fact, this is one of those stories in the Bible that, quite frankly, the first reading of it kind of makes you gasp a little bit and wonder, what in the world? That doesn't make any sense. Or perhaps we even go so far as to say, that was totally out of character for Jesus. How does that fit in with the rest of what we know about him in the Bible? But of course, you and I both know that everything that God does and everything that Christ did is designed to teach us something. And there's a wonderful message in here about how we should go about seeking the answer to some of these perplexing questions, some of the problematic things that we have come up in our lives. There's an appropriate response. There's an appropriate thing to do. And I want to begin by, we're going to read it first and foremost. But I want to go through the lesson and point out just these three fundamental ideas about what you and I need to know and understand when this stuff, for lack of a better word, comes up. Unless we think stuff is kind of an uncomplicated word. It's used multiple times in the Bible. I never do that. I'm going to talk about it. Did a whole lesson about stuff. Never thought that word, appeared in Scripture, but it does. It does. Wonderful lesson about stuff. But anyhow, when this kind of stuff comes up, what is the appropriate response? But let's go ahead and read the text. Beginning with verse 21 and reading down through verse 28 of Matthew chapter 15. And Jesus went away from there and withdrew to the district of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a Canaanite woman from the region came out and was crying, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David. My daughter is severely oppressed by a demon." But he did not answer her a word. And his disciples came and begged him, saying, "Send her away. Send her away, for she is crying out after us." And he answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me." And he answered, "It is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." And she said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table." And Jesus answered her, "O woman, great is your faith. Be it done for you as you desire." And her daughter was healed instantly. Isn't that a funny little story? There's a couple things in there that really, really are perplexing. For instance, this woman comes up to him and he seems to totally ignore her. And then when he does finally acknowledge her, he has this comment that more or less can be reduced down to calling her a dog. It doesn't exactly seem like the most friendly exchange in the world. And yet there's a lot of good lessons for us here. A lot of wonderful truths from this passage of Scripture that will help us when we have questions and we have concerns and we are struggling with things. The first thing that I want to point out is her petition. Her petition, whether you want to call it a petition, whether you want to call it a plea or a cry for help or whatever. She went and she sought help. Now, again, this is another one of those points where we could probably stop and talk a long time about that. How many people do you know? How many people do you know who have problems and yet they won't get help? They won't get help. You can see that they have a problem. They'll look you in the eye and you know they have an issue, but they'll say things like, I'm okay. I don't have a problem. And maybe it's kind of, just denial. But maybe they're just being prideful. Or maybe they have this kind of, I want to go it alone mentality. I'm strong enough. And to not go it alone and to acknowledge that I'm not strong enough, that means my faith must be weak. Actually, the opposite is true. It takes a strong and faithful person to say, God, I give it to you. And to let go. This woman sought help. She had a petition. She had a plea, and she was not afraid to take it before the person that she knew, at least on some level, could help her. So she has this petition. And in the petition, she states the reason that she came. Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David. My daughter is severely oppressed by a demon. She's from Tyre and Sidon. Now, in case you don't know this is Gentile country. She is not a Jewish woman. Matter of fact, the text says that she is a Canaanite woman. How does she know about Jesus Christ? How does she know that he is Lord, that he is Son of David, that he is even remotely capable of answering this request? How does she know that information? I don't know all the details of how she knows this, but it doesn't take a genius to kind of figure out that here was a woman who was searching. She had a problem. She searched out an answer, and she knew the genuine thing when she saw it. Now, again, I don't know if you know the landscape religiously of this day and age, but if you go over to the book of Acts, it kind of gives you a little bit of insight. People are still worshiping idols. People are still looking at magicians and all of the things they do, the sorcerers and the tellers of the stars, just like they were in the Old Testament, to find a lot of the answers to a lot of these life's problems. And there were physicians available as well. We don't know if this woman had consulted any of those people. But in this particular occasion, she finds herself in the presence of the Lord, of the Son of David, who can help her solve her problem. It's one thing to have a plea, and it's one thing to have a petition, but it's a whole different thing to actually go to the person who can help solve that problem. I mean, I don't take my television down to the auto mechanic to have him repaired. Right? I don't go to the veterinarian when I get injured. I'm sure he'd probably be able to do something, but I don't go there. We've got to go to the right place. And this woman goes to the right place, and she cries out before him, shouting after him, as the apostles say. Now, of course, it seems like it's bothering them, but Christ doesn't seem to mind. At first, he's kind of ignoring her. And I've always kind of thought, I wonder if that was a show for the disciples. Because surely he ends up helping them. And of course, maybe that was his intention all along. If you go over to Mark, and Mark's account of this in chapter 7, you can just mark it down and go there later. But in Mark chapter 7, verse 25, the Bible actually says, Mark actually records that the woman had actually heard of Jesus. So here we have a woman who has a problem. She has a petition and a plea, and she wants to put it before the right person. She knows the genuine article when she sees it. When she hears about it, she comes to understand. And then she seeks Jesus out with her problem. Folks, it's no different today, is it? I mean, that song that we so often sing, Did You Think to Pray? Everybody remember that song? I don't know. I mean, I guess often's probably the wrong word to use. I can't remember the last time we sung it, but there's that song, and most of us know the words. Do we think to pray? Do we think to take our problems before Jesus? I mean, we're told that you have not because you what? You ask not, right? Of course, if we go over to the book of James, that wisdom literature of the New Testament, James tells us that, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, right? But then he goes on to say what? He says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him what? Ask. And God is going to do what? He's going to give, right? I mean, you don't have to have the exact word, but he's going to give it to you. And not only is he going to give it to you, he's not going to hold back in giving it to you. It's not like he's going to chastise you for asking. It's not like he's going to act like he's annoyed because you ask. But he's going to give you that wisdom. Providentially working in our lives, answering those prayers. But you got to ask. As Christ on another occasion would say, we have to what? We have to seek, and we have to knock, and what? It will be open. And what's the other one? There's a third one. Ask, seek, knock, right? Yeah. All three of those things. That's our part. Here in the story, the woman takes that step. But then I want you to notice the next part of it. Not only does she have this petition, but she is persistent in her petition. And man, she had a lot of hurdles to overcome here, right? Most people today would not endure this type of treatment. He ignored me? You got to be kidding me. Man, I went over to that church and nobody even said anything to me. Never going back there. People would be so offended. But look at all this woman goes through. Look at all the things this woman goes through. Or, to put it a different way, consider all of the obstacles. There, verses 23 all the way down through 27. Just kind of break it down and look at all the different things. She is not of the right race. Christ pretty much spells it out. She's not the right race. I've come here to minister to the Jews. And she's not a Jew. She's not a Jew. Nor does she have the right religious beliefs. She points out that he is the son of David. She points out that he is a Jewish person who would have been guided by the law that was carried down through all of those years to that Old Testament history. Practiced till that very day in Jerusalem. So she was of the wrong religion. She was of the wrong race. And then, quite frankly, she just suffers outright rejection. The apostles of Christ see her as nothing more than an annoyance. Tell her to go away. Tell her to go away. I mean, can you imagine that? And then Christ himself says, it's not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. She's rejected. Doesn't look like her plea is going to be heard. And yet, she persists. Now, at what point in the road would we have stopped? Would we have stopped when we were told that we were of the wrong race? Would we have stopped when we were told, and of course that's a big issue nowadays. Big issue. Would we have stopped there? Would we have gotten so offended that we would have walked away and not got our answer? Or would we have stopped when they said, well, you're not of the right religious beliefs? Or would we have stopped when they just flat out said, we can't have you here? At what point do we become so offended at the reality of our situation and the fact that we are different than this group of people over here? what point do we allow that to so affect us that we throw up our hands and our petition becomes nothing to us? Not with this woman. She continues on. She continues on and she says, "Yes, Lord, but yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table." Here's a woman that wants to succeed. Christ gives her an argument, and you'll notice he doesn't argue back. It's one of the few times in the Bible when a statement is made directly to him. An argument is put back to him, and he doesn't counter it with something that trumps it. There are countless times when the Pharisees would try to trap him, and he would outwit them and beat them at their own game. Of course, that's not his intention here, I don't believe. But she argues back with him and is rewarded because she is persistent. Now, of course, we're told about persistence in prayer, and that is the whole point of the ask, seek, knock teaching that Christ gives. But there is power in persistence. It is that persistence that brings the opportunity. It is that power of persistence that opens up those doors. You see, if we give up back here on the road, who's to say that just a few feet ahead, there isn't that door that opens up, that allows us to go down this path that helps us overcome? There's something to be said for stick-to-itiveness. We've got to stay in the game, right? That's what this woman did. And it opened up all kinds of possibilities for her. "Oh, woman, great is your faith." I don't know if I've ever pointed this out before, but Christ doesn't say that very often. He doesn't say that very often. There's only a few times that he actually says that. And you know, every single one of those times, he doesn't say it to Jewish people, but to Gentiles. Who demonstrate their faith when they have all of these challenges. And yet they demonstrate that faith anyhow. When I think of this woman's persistence, I think of the friends who have the friend who's paralyzed. He can't walk on his own. They come up to the house. You remember the story? They come up to the house and they can't get in. The guy's on a bed. I mean, they can't get through the crowd. So what do? They go up onto the roof of a house that is not theirs. I mean, think about it. Now, their roofs aren't like ours. They're different, and they probably would have been a little easier to deconstruct. But they go up onto the roof of a house that's not theirs and start tearing it apart and lower their friend down right in front of Jesus. Man, that takes some serious guts. That is some serious persistence. Now, of course, the message there has a lot to do about, friendship, but it has a lot to do with faith as well. We need to be persistent in our faith. And it has to be a faith that is strong to overcome the great trials that life will very simply throw at us. And then the final thing I want to point out is the prize that she receives at the end. "Oh, woman, great is your faith. Be it done for you as you desire." As you desire. Now, that's a pretty amazing statement. It doesn't always work out that way, does it, in Scripture? There are times when people ask a certain thing, and Christ, even in answering the question, gives them an answer that's really not an answer to their question, but an answer to the question that they should have been asking in the first place. There are other times when, prayers are answered, but they're not answered in perhaps the way that we would think of them conventionally being answered. And sometimes that's the way God works, because it's his prerogative, right? Now, we're told in places like Romans chapter 8 that God always works to our good. We love him, and we embrace his righteousness. And God promises us that things are going to work out if we'll simply put our faith and our trust in him, do what we're supposed to do, and allow him to have the rest. Then it's going to work out in our favor. And that's said all over the Scripture. But in this case, what the woman asked for is what she got. Go back to the request. My daughter is severely oppressed by a demon. Now, what exactly did she ask for? Well, we've got to go back actually a little further. He says, have mercy on me. And then she goes on to say, my daughter is severely oppressed by a demon. What the woman asked for was mercy, because she was plagued by this problem. Essentially, she says, I need this problem to go away. I need these demons to disappear. Because anything less is just not merciful. And Christ says, you will have what you request. Now, in this case, it's clear on a couple of different fronts. Number one, I think most of us are going to acknowledge that the demon here is obviously, one of those demon possessions. But that's not a good thing, is it? I mean, we don't speak of demons in that sense of, hey, he was demon possessed, and man, it did wonders for him. No, that's not the way we talk about it. Obviously, this is one of those things that is just patently and on the surface of it, kind of wrong, or on the wrong spectrum of things. I think it's kind of along the same lines as when James again talks about this prayer that we're supposed to engage in. Ask. You don't ask, you won't have. But then he goes on to say something else too. He says, but you have to ask in what? In faith, right? Literally, it means in accordance with the faith. This woman didn't ask for anything that would have gone against the will of God, or was somehow putting God in a position to do something that God could not do. She had a petition. She had a persistence. And in the end, she gained the prize because of the persistence, because of the petition, but because it was offered with a sense of righteousness. In other words, it was the right thing to do. It's funny, the things that people will pray for or ask for. If you were privy to it, and sometimes you may be, you could pretty much tap them on the shoulder and say, God's never going to give you that. Why not? Well, because you're asking him to do something that is contrary to what he wants for you. And that should be really obvious. And I wonder why it's not to you. But we have to ask according to the will of God. But Christ responded to her. Christ responded to her, and he praises her faith. But then he rewards her for her faith. And he doesn't just say your faith has saved you. He says, great is your faith. And again, that's a kind of lesson in and of itself. What does it mean to have great faith? The word faith in and of itself means strong conviction. You add the word great to it, and what you have is this emphatic statement. Greatly strong is your conviction. It's like almost over the top, repetitive, so to speak. But our conviction brings this reward. Now, for us, when we want to triumph over our problems, first I think we need to have that petition. We need to, in that petition, seek the right person who can actually do something about it. And then we need to be persistent. You can't pray one time driving down the road in the car, kind of flippantly, half doing this and half doing that. And then 2 weeks later, having done nothing, say, God didn't answer my prayer. What did Paul say about it? He said, pray without ceasing. Pray without ceasing. If you've got something that you're struggling with, don't spend all your time out there beating against the wind. Spend more time on your knees praying to God, who can do more about it than you ever could with all of your strength. So we need to be persistent especially in things like prayer. And then if we want to gain that prize, we've got to constantly demonstrate our faith and seek those righteous things of God. I love the story of the Canaanite woman. It's just a unique little story that, to me, drives a lot of things home. Do we get offended and turn away? Or do we actually embrace the course that God so often gives us to find our way out of our difficult issues? Sometimes it's not really the issue that causes us problems. Sometimes it's our poor reaction to it that causes us problems. We don't react in the right way. The last person we think of is God. The second to last person, or the second to last thing we think of is prayer. And the third to the last thing we think of is persistence. And yet those are the very three things that God says, that Christ says, are going to help us through any ordeal that we have. And let's face it, this woman had an ordeal. She walked into the conversation with this massive ordeal. None of us are immune. All of us have those issues. The question is, have we brought them before God? Of course, the biggest thing that we can do is become a child of God. The biggest issue that you have is that wall of sin between you and your God. Have you become one of his children? Have you heard his word? Have you confessed, based upon the faith that you've gained from that word, that Christ is the Son of the living God? Have you entered the waters of baptism and been washed clean? Maybe you're here tonight and that's where you are, ready to take that step, and we urge you to make that known. Don't let another moment go by. Make that petition heard. Yes, I want to be saved. Yes, I need to be saved. Yes, I must be saved now. God will hear, and he's the only one that can do that for you. Maybe you simply need help in some struggle or trial. Whatever your need is, come. We stand and sing.